Testing, testing, testing. Roger, Roger. Oh, we're trying to see if this is at least sounds working. Is it good? Okay. Welcome to Creature Kind Live Daily News. We are streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. So let's dive back into the Mesozoic era, and feel free to put in any comments about prehistoric to current animals. So, from Sci News, a giant Triassic ichthyosaur is one of the biggest animals ever. According to a study released this week in the journal Plus One, an isolated bone from the lower jaw of a prehistoric marine reptile found in Somerset, UK, belongs to one of the largest animals ever. So, by the looks of it, at least on the picture, I am guessing that this is possibly the reconstruction of some member of the Shastasauridae lineage of ichthyosaurs, which would contain the largest species of marine ichthyosaur sauroptegan reptiles to exist, and explicitly to the Triassic period. Now, while it's very possible during the first 5 to 10 million years of the later Jurassic, they might have existed, but at least so far, it only seems to be towards the Triassic, about 201 million years ago, first evolving about 245 to 250 million years ago. And some of these creatures, especially whatever specific species this is, in many cases were finless, at least when it came to the dorsal fin. The dorsal fin is that top fin towards the or along the back of many species, not just marine reptiles, but even different species of fish, like for instance, sharks, and even orcas, dolphins in general. And these were carnivores, so feeding on really different species of ammonites, different species of fish, occasionally maybe smaller marine reptiles. So giant ichthyosaur. So this is supposed to be the Shonisaurus. So fossil collector Paul de la Salle found the 205 million-year-old late Triassic epoch specimen on the beach at Lilstock, Somerset in May 2016. Paleontologist Dean Lomax from the University of Manchester and Professor Judy Massare of SUNY College at Brockport identified it as an incomplete bone called a syringular from the lower jaw of a giant ichthyosaur. We have also found giant ichthyosaurs, such as Shonisaurus specifically. I mean, it's interesting. It's referring to England, where whatever specimen of a certain other species has been discovered. Considering Shonisaurus was found over in Nevada, and I believe there was another species discovered in Africa, possibly Tanzania. However, we also have found more recently a larger species of Shastasaur called Ichthyotitan over in England recently. There was another species um, also found in North America. So the researchers estimate the length of this specimen's body would have been up to 85 feet or 26 meters, almost the size of a blue whale. Well, towards the length was approaching a blue whale. Blue whales can reach around 100 feet or pushing about 30 to 32 meters. However, the weight when it came to the marine species of ichthyosaurs was much lighter. There were certain species that could reach possibly a little over 100 tons, but that would be about it. Well, not 100 tons. No. Yeah, that would be blue whales. Male blue whales can reach about 200 in certain cases. So they also compared the specimen with several ichthyosaur species, including the largest ichthyosaur known, the Shastasaurid Shonisaurus taikonensis, which is 69 feet or 21 meters long. This was also taking place before the Ichthyotitan, which occurred in the past year and a half, I believe. So they found similarities between the new specimen and Shonisaurus taikonensis, which suggests the little stock bone belongs to a giant Shastasaurid-like ichthyosaur.
Bland Martinez says hi.
Well, welcome aboard, Theropod. As the specimen is represented only by a large piece of jaw, it is difficult to provide a size estimate. Actually, there are many instances with at least different species of dinosaurs where we have found the jaw and the size is pretty much based off of that specimen, or at least part of the jaw. And in some cases, even when it comes to different species of marine reptiles, certain prehistoric mammal species, and even different types of proto mammals and reptiles themselves. It is by using a simple scaling factor and comparing the same bone in Shonisaurus sacaniensis, the little stock specimen is about 25% larger. Um, whoa. Wow. Okay, this is a much larger species of ichthyosaur, whatever this is. Okay. Let's bring up another species of possibly marine reptile. So uh the Lasiocodon, Thalasiocodon. Did he pop up?
Yeah, it's Thalassommedon.
Oh, Thalasmiodon. So this is an early species of plesiosaur from the Jurassic. However, so this is pushing like around 180 to 190 million years ago. This reconstruction has a lot of problems. First of all, those fish look like they're stunned and having trouble getting any oxygen, at least. But the plesiosaur also has a lot of problems.
Maybe he knocked them all out.
Yeah, it seems that way. But plesiosaurs were probably not creating the bubbles or those bubble rings that humpback whales would do today. Now, the question is, were they at all cooperative when it came to hunting down different species of smaller fish? It certainly is possible. He also has an ichthyosaur or shark like tail, which these animals did have tail flukes, but it would not be reconstructed in that sort of a way. Also, the neck structure itself, I think, is slightly thin and also too erect in a way. It should be quite aligned with the whole neck in general when it's moving either further up towards the surface or down towards the depths. But the skull is also simply a little too long and narrow, but the teeth are very far off, quite too long. Yeah, even when comparing it to this skull, they're still just quite off. They were quite wide in that reconstruction. But yeah, this is definitely a very complete reconstruction of, well, I'd say specimen for the Lasmiodon. So this is a species of plesiosaur, I believe, reaching somewhere around 15 to 20 feet in length, or possibly even slightly longer. So probably reaching somewhere between um, 4.3 to maybe 6 meters, and was just likely feeding on maybe even smaller ichthyosaur pups at certain points, at least belonging to different species. The large shastosaurs of the Triassic have now already gone extinct. Let's see. This it could be him. I mean, he has that distinct jaw structure. At least the skull in this instance, it seems to be a bit wider or fuller and just matching the overall animal. Also, I like how even the neck structure, it's just aligning with the body and the skull. And also the tail fluke looks much more realistic. In some cases, it almost has like a symbospondylus ichthyosaur sort of a look to it, and not necessarily like other species of plesiosaurs. And just to mention real quick, yes, the marine reptiles during the Mesozoic did coexist with different species of sharks, but sharks during the Mesozoic didn't really reach much more than maybe wow. Well, okay. Usually it was about a ton or maybe 2,000 pounds or a little over 950 kilograms. But I believe there was a recent discovery of a certain species of either late Jurassic or early Cretaceous shark that could probably reach somewhere between 3 to 4 tons. I do not remember the species, however, but so far it seems to be the largest shark during the time of the dinosaurs and likely would have hunted certain smaller plesiosaur species and even hunting different types of ichthyosaurs and possibly even younger pliosaurs in some instances. So the long-skulled predators of the mid to late Jurassic and into the early Cretaceous. Well, this is not a bad reconstruction. Okay, the tail fluke, I guess from this point of view, yeah, it looks I guess it just looks a little more plesiosaur-like. It is interesting, despite how early in the evolution of plesiosaurs this animal occurred, which was back in the early Jurassic. It does share a lot in common with certain later species like Elasmosaurus. Considering it had a very long neck compared to its body size, many plesiosaurs did not. It's like when you look at the different species of cryptoclydids from the mid Jurassic and the late Jurassic, they were quite short compared to their body size. You're also looking at a family of plesiosaurs, which the lengths overall didn't reach much more than maybe 13 to 15 feet, or pushing around 4 to 4.4 meters, and probably didn't weigh also much more than 4 to 600 pounds in some instances, or um, somewhere between like 180 to 280 kilograms. So he's just feeding also in probably different species of squid. Okay, let's head back to the ichthyosaur. So other comparisons suggest the low stock ichthyosaur was at least 65 to 82 feet, or 20 to 25 meters. Of course, such estimates are not entirely realistic because of differences between species. Nonetheless, simple scaling is commonly used to estimate size, especially when comparative material is scarce. You do have it where different paleontologists want in on um, just simply putting out their estimate of a certain size of a species of animal, despite it's probably not being accurate. In 1850, a large bone was described from the late Triassic, about 208 million years old, of Ostcliffe, Gloucestershire, UK. We do have other species or specimens of ichthyosaurs that come from Gloucestershire, and I think occasionally even certain Jurassic dinosaurs as well. Four other similarly incomplete bones were also found and described. Two of them are now missing and presumed destroyed. Oh, that's sad. They have been identified as the limbs of several dinosaurs, stegosaurs, and sauropods, indeterminate dinosaurs, and other intermediate dinosaurs and other reptiles. That's interesting. We just jumped to the Jurassic. There were not any species of stegosaurs or sauropods inhabiting the Triassic. You had the prosauropods, which were the ancestors to the sauropods, and early primitive theropharian species of ornithischian dinosaurs that would later evolve into the stegosaurs and ankylosauromorphs. In fact, let's bring one up: the Scelidosaurus.
Who?
Scelidosaurus. Scelidosaurus. So, yeah, this is a bit odd that this occurred. Maybe it's an adjacent fossil basin or formation. Yeah, here he is. So this is somewhere around 190 million years ago, towards the very first 12 to 13 million years of the Jurassic, that this creature was existing. Probably not reaching much more than 7 to 8 feet in length, or
Is this
pushing.
it?
Yep, pushing somewhere around maybe 2.3 meters, and probably wasn't weighing much more than maybe 300 pounds, or a little over 140 kilograms. And it was an herbivore, so feeding on earlier species of ferns, occasionally going after different types of shrubs. Seems to be indicating either they're just crossing a very shallow, sort of, I guess, a rapids part of a river. But, I think overall this reconstruction of Scelidosaurus is very good, and they're making it heavily armored. That's also what's interesting, is that the earlier Theropharians, before the true Stegosaurs and Ankylosauromorphs were evolved, were actually quite heavily armored, and it's something that you would expect to continue in evolution to, protect them against different species of predators, even each other species of herbivores. And instead, whoa, I do not know what this would be from. It's not a bad Scelidosaurus. I think his armor, though, is a bit exaggerated. Unless we have found more recent depictions of much elongated spikes or osteoderms of Scelidosaurus, this might be a bit too long. They would be similar to maybe the mid osteoderms, the mid white osteoderms along the rib cage,
I was just
or
looking at that
towards.
face.
Um, yeah, towards the upper back. Yeah, I mean, that's not really a bad Scelidosaurus face. Now, the osteoderms or even the horns towards the back of his skull, that's a bit debatable. Now, what is interesting is that for even later in Kylosauromorphs and Stegosaurs, he is quite heavily armored along his legs and even his rib cage. If you look at other reconstructions, it's pretty much protected to nearly the underside or the underbelly of the herbivore. So it is quite heavily armored. So it would have helped to protect it from different species of megalosaurs or earlier relatives of megalosaurs, as well as different species of neotheropods in the region that it inhabited. But besides that, it was probably a very calm animal. Would make a pretty good pet. His feet seem fine. Even on this specimen, yeah, I think it looks pretty good. The osteoderms on this reconstruction seem a bit more realistic. However, I would say that there's something a bit off about his overall stature, especially the one towards the center. Well, in the background, it just seems a little too upright. Now, I would say that the Theropharians might have had a slightly, well, I would say in some instances, a less upright posture, at least towards the upper back vertebrae and towards the pelvis than their later descendants, being the stegosaurs, which in many cases, it's not necessarily that they would have had a major hill like presence, kind of like with what you would see in older depictions from 1930s, actually further back into the 1890s. Actually, I would say that there were certain books, like up until the 1960s and 70s, were showing a very hill-like look for Stegosaurus, and then Jurassic World pops up, and it's like, you serious? And in reality, it would have been much more horizontal in overall shape. In fact, like the Stegosaurs over in the Lost World were much more paleo accurate compared to those in Jurassic World. So let's head back. Let's see. Um, However, with the discovery of the Lil stock specimen, this new study refutes previous identifications and also the most recent assertion that the os bones represent an early experiment of dinosaur like gigantism in terrestrial reptiles. Um, I guess it was possible for the time, but this isn't necessarily surprising for ichthyosaurs in general. We've known this for several decades, possibly like even up to a century with large ichthyosaur species. They are, in fact, jaw fragments of giant, previously unrecognized ichthyosaurs. One of the ost bones might also be an ichthyosaur syringular. If it is, by comparison with the little stock specimen, it might represent a much larger animal. To verify these findings, we need a complete giant Triassic ichthyosaur from the UK. A lot easier said than done. And that's when Ichthyotitan would later help. Okay. Well, this is interesting, a bit mysterious. Oh, let's head to another part of the Mesozoic. And please like and subscribe. From Sci News, Triassic reptile from Tanzania finally gets scientific name Mandasuchus Tanyauchen. An international team of paleontologists from the Natural History Museum, London, the University of Birmingham, and Virginia Tech has formerly given an ancient carnivorous reptile a name. Over several decades since its fossils were found in Tanzania, this is over in East Africa, the formal species description of Mandasuchus Tanyauchen is published in a special memoir, the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology. So, who is this? Oh, he is definitely a very strange sort of a reptile. I'm guessing he probably was around before the Jurassic. So, over 201 million years old. Very strange indeed. You could say he has somewhat dinosaur like characteristics, at least along the skull, the shape of it. The rest of him is very reptile like, or just like a lizard in general. Also, maybe he's a crocodilomorph, but he just seems to have a lot more in common with different species of crocodile monitors, just lizards in general. And crocodilomorphs are not lizards; they're very distantly related. So I'm wondering if this animal is not even a member of Archosauridae in general. And I was actually thinking also by first glance of the skull that it would be an herbivore. I'm actually a bit shocked that they're mentioning that this is a carnivore. It's almost like he's got a bit of an ornithopod sort of a look, slightly.
He just looks so sad.
Yeah, well, he looks sad or like he got ripped off on something. Like they told me that there were smaller reptiles I could feed on over here or different fish, and they already migrated. A cousin of modern day crocodiles, Mandasuchus Tanyauchen was an archosaur, a lineage of reptiles that include dinosaurs, crocodiles, and birds. Or actually, you know what? Maybe he got kicked out of a territory. So the ancient reptile lived around 245 million years ago. Whoa, okay. This is pretty much before any species of dinosaur that has evolved, but there have been different types of archosaurs that have already existed. You do have different species of proto mammals. It's also before some of the first true mammals would evolve as well. So the early Triassic period, this is within the first 7 to 8 million years.
Wait a minute, when did true mammals come about?
Seems to be around the first time or the time as some of the earliest species of theropods would appear. So somewhere around 230 to 231 million years ago. So probably around 15 million years later
Wait, what's 15 million years later?
when first true mammals would evolve and grew up to 10 feet or 3 meters in length. Yeah, he does look somewhat large, and then you could like see him maybe only being about 3 feet in length or pushing around a meter. And no, he's actually about 10 feet. The fossilized remains of Mandasuchus Tanyauchen were first discovered in the 1930s. Wow. Well, that was a while back. As part of a major paleontological expedition to East Africa. Oh, yeah. There were many of these going on back in the 1920s, 30s, I believe into the 40s, and even later on, which included work on a geological formation in Tanzania called the Manda Beds. I believe I've heard of this region. I don't recall any species of true dinosaurs coming from here, but definitely I believe proto dinosaurs were the earlier ancestors. So the fossils in these beds date from the Middle Triassic epoch. This was a time when the archosaurs began their rise to dominance. English paleontologist Alan Scharig proposed the name Mandasuchus for the species in the 1950s when he studied the Tanzanian fossils as part of his PhD thesis. Scharig continued his career in paleontology but never completed his work on this reptile. In recent years, new expeditions to Tanzania have found additional fossils, which have remained in Tanzania. Okay, let's bring up a species of dinosaur to collaborate with this reptile, but he existed much later in time. The Staurikosaurus, Staurikosaurus.
I want to see if I can find the color one. This looks like someone photocopied it.
Yeah, this is from an older depiction of actually there were quite a few reconstructions of Styracosaurus that look exactly like this. I also kind of wonder if they were based on the same model. It's very possible. He's one of the earliest species of neotheropods to exist. This was pushing somewhere around 228 million years ago during the mid Triassic period. This is a much better reconstruction of the animal, but it's definitely just a major jump in overall theory as to how this animal would have looked, given a much more slender sort of a build, and then this type of a look pops up. It's not bad. I would say the proto mammal is more accurate, or the relative of Placerius in this instance. But Styracosaurus, it's not too large of a creature. It is pushing somewhere around 7 feet in length, or maybe around 2.2 meters. And probably also didn't weigh much more than maybe 80 to 120 pounds, or pushing a little over 40 kilograms. So this creature was inhabiting different parts of Brazil, Argentina, Chile during the Triassic period and would likely come into contact with earlier species of theropod dinosaurs such as Eoraptor or Eodromius, and also come into contact with different types of prosauropods. But it was likely a bit lower in the food chain compared to the different species of pseudosuchians or the different types of crocodilomorphs in the region, like different species of rauisuchians. And then there were even the rhynchosaurs, so the curved species of pseudosuchians that would have preyed on different species of prosauropods, even the earlier theropods at this point, and the different species of proto-mammals. But Styracosaurus was likely feeding on some of the earliest species of true mammals, going after the hatchlings of different species of prosauropods, and um, likely also feeding on smaller reptiles and amphibians. Considering at this point the dinosaur variety is pretty small. We have found more species from this time in more recent years, but this is also still when they're just evolving, considering they've only been around at this point for maybe a little over 10 million years. Um, yeah, he could possibly hunt um, I'd say like a baby relative of Placerius, but definitely not a full grown individual, which could reach, depending on the species, somewhere between 400 pounds and, in some cases, referring to the proto-mammal lineage of the Stachyridae, um, lineage was probably there was a species weighing over 7 tons. However, it did not coexist with Styracosaurus, but it could easily turn him into a pizza crust. Whoa, 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 whoa! Okay, we have a odd Jurassic Park raptor that's trying to identify as a Styracosaurus, and he seems to have killed some like feathered Jurassic dinosaur by chance. It could be a Cretaceous one, however, like some relative of the Microraptorids. This is a weird depiction. Though this is possible, like how Argentina would have looked like during the dry season at certain points, or even different parts of Brazil. Okay, well, let's head back to the article. Combined with whoa, wow. With the older discoveries, these are shedding light on exciting topics such as early dinosaur evolution. Studies like these highlight the important role that museums play as storehouses of information of the natural world, said senior author Professor Paul Barrett, a paleontologist in the Department of Earth Sciences at the Natural History Museum, London. Although it took decades to complete this work, specimens remain safe and accessible in our collections and now form the basis of this amazing new species. Wait, so is it new? Because it doesn't sound like it. It was yeah, Cherig that wanted to name it Mandasuchus. Unless he's talking about specifically Tanyauchen and which Mandasuchus would be the genus. Maybe there's more than one species of Mandasuchus? Hmm. Oh, this is a bit of a mystery. Okay, well, I mean, it's good to see. We definitely have him confirmed. So, well, let's head to another part of the Mesozoic. Oh, okay, so from Sci News, Chilestiventis hensi, newly discovered Triassic pterosaur lived in harsh desert. Hmm. So paleontologists have discovered what they say is a completely unexpected desert dwelling pterosaur that lived in what is now Utah, the United States, about 210 million years ago. Well, the pterosaurs at this point were not very large, maybe pushing around 4 feet in total wingspan or pushing maybe 1.3 meters. So the discovery of this early pterosaur reported in the journal Nature Ecology and Evolution sheds new light on early pterosaur anatomy and development. I think what's also interesting is it's coming in from Utah. Utah, definitely as you head later into the Mesozoic or the Jurassic specifically, becomes a haven for different species of sauropods, carnosaurs, or different species of larger theropod dinosaurs like the allosaurs, even different types of megalosaurs in the region. And new stegosaur species would occur. Who else? Also, this is like one of the earlier heydays for different species of ornithopods. So, which would evolve into creatures like Camptosaurus. Wow, this looks a little more Jurassic-like, at least in the overall appearance of this pterosaur, almost like the Dimorphodons or the Eudimorphodon lineage, which would rule certain parts of the Jurassic, especially over in certain areas of North America, Europe, and I believe even Africa. But some of those species won't occur until somewhere between 160 to 170 million years ago. This is 210 million years ago during the last 8 million years of the Triassic. So this is quite astonishing. He seems very advanced for a pterosaur species inhabiting the Triassic. You have certain other species of pterosaurs that don't really have this type of anything like this type of a jaw structure, such as the Titanosaurus from Arizona. And that was also a bit earlier in time, maybe pushing somewhere around 218 to 220 million years ago. And this is a major jump. I mean, those specific conical teeth towards the front, which were probably helping it capture different species of fish, though you had different species of pterosaurs that likely, in fact, I think we have evidence for them hunting fish, but they just simply had a long beak. And also very odd molars towards like the mid center of the skull. That's quite odd. It's all like very
Are those even molars?
yeah, it's like a different type of a incisor or a canine almost. I guess those are more of like molars towards the back. Very strange creature. I think what's also interesting is that the way they're having him um hold the branch and somewhat balance on the palm itself. I think it's a bit debatable as to whether or not certain pterosaurs could do this, even the smaller species. I think it certainly is possible, like if they only weigh a few ounces in this case, maybe a pound or two, or not really reaching much more than a kilogram. But as you head into heavier sizes, that becomes a bit impossible. So, pterosaurs were giant flying reptiles that flew over the heads of the dinosaurs, soaring on skin wings supported by a single huge finger. That is true. There's their thumb, index, and middle finger that you see, and then the rest of the wing is controlled just by their ring finger, and they did not have pinkies. Soaring, they were the largest animals ever to take wing, originating in the late Triassic epoch, around 215 million years ago. They might be slightly older, but
Ever to take wing?
I think that's just another way to
Never heard that term.
yeah, another way to say, taking flight. They thrived to the end of the Cretaceous period, 66 million years ago. That is true, and they had exploded. I mean, even to the late Jurassic, but definitely the early Cretaceous, and to pretty much every lineage that would continue into the late Cretaceous period. So by 143 million years ago, you had several different types of pteranodontids. The Rhamphorhynchid lineage of pterosaurs at that point had already gone extinct, but they pretty much thrived during the mid and late Jurassic. So Triassic pterosaurs are extraordinarily rare and are known exclusively from marine deposits in the Alps, Italy, Austria, and Switzerland, except for Arctodactylus crumptonellus from fluvial deposits in Greenland. Yeah, that's a funny one. But we do have certain species of pterosaurs coming in from Africa, South America, and North America during the Triassic, but it's also true they're not very common. The new Triassic pterosaur is from the Saints and Sinners Quarry near Dinosaur National Monument in Utah. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Wait, did they mention earlier that this was over in America? Yeah. So, yeah, this is really nice to see. So it's not just Arizona. Named Salistiventus henseni, the ancient flying reptile was comparatively large, a wingspan of over 5 feet, and lived in harsh desert environments. It is the only record of desert dwelling non pterodactyloid pterosaurs. I wonder if that's changed recently because this is a few years back, but That's still quite astonishing. Would still be extremely rare. It predates all known desert pterosaurs by more than 65 million years. That would mean, wow, that's the early Cretaceous period. Quite astonishing. I wonder who that other specific pterosaur is that they're referring to. We're getting insights into the beginning of pterosaurs. Ours shows that they're extraordinarily diverse, said Brigham Young University's Dr. Brooks Britt. Okay. Um, I guess we can also bring up this time another species of theropod dinosaur, but a lot larger. The Afrovenator. Afrovenator. Oh, yeah, this is a really good model of him. So, this is a species of megalosaur from the Jurassic. This is pushing over 170 million years ago. And it was probably somewhere around 20 to 23 feet in length, or pushing 6 to 7 meters, and probably weighed somewhere around 12 to 1,300 pounds, or a little over 600 kilograms, and was likely feeding on some of the earlier predecessors to the different species of ornithopods, like what would evolve into Camptosaurus over in North America. But that animal won't evolve until maybe 20 million years later into the late Jurassic. Different species of smaller sauropods at this point, but smaller is a relative term. I'm still referring to species that could weigh over 20 tons, considering there's been a big jump in sauropod evolution at this point. Yeah, this is a really good reconstruction of the skull, the cervical vertebrae, or the neck vertebrae. Very megalosaur like skull structure in general. And even when it comes to the teeth, I would say in some cases they're a bit more, they're a bit wider compared to the much more knife like teeth of what you would see in many species of allosaurs or of Allosauroideae. Yeah, wow. Yeah, this is a really good depiction of Afrovenator. It is odd as to why specifically they gave it that name, considering it doesn't seem to have any evidence for a wide variety of feathers being around the head. Maybe when they were younger, but that would probably also cover the whole body in general to maintain insulation, just to keep warm. Considering you might have had it occasionally where temperatures could slightly drop, but it wouldn't be too much. The Jurassic in general was probably the hottest time, or one of the hottest times during the Mesozoic, especially the mid to late Jurassic. You had certain warming events during the Triassic as well. Um, well, interesting. So we have it to where possibly some Camarasauromorph fighting off the Afrovenators in this instance. Is a really good depiction. I wonder that youngsters maybe not supposed to be much more than 1 ton, or no, he seems much larger than them in this case. Maybe he's like a 2-ton individual, but obviously the adults are probably reaching somewhere between 11 to 20 tons. This instance, it seems a bit thin. I'm trying to think of what theropod this could better represent. It almost has like a Torvosaurus sort of skull in some instances, but even Torvosaurus is a bit more heavily built, at least in the, well, I'd say overall. The arms of this animal are extremely skinny, and even the toes seem a bit short. Yeah, I'm not sure who this is. It almost has like certain similarities to different species of neotheropods, also from the Triassic, if maybe when looking at Herrerasaurs in certain instances, possibly even certain species of Coelurosaurs, or like even the Megaraptorids later into the Cretaceous. But for an Afrovenator, it seems a bit too thin. This is better. Yeah, even adding feathers towards like the upper part of the back, the neck, certainly possible. Wonder what ornithopod he's feeding on, and did the ornithopod even coexist with him? Trying to think of oh, yeah, even the horn-like structures, I mean, it's very prominent in many species of megalosaurs to have also distinct, little nubs towards the front of their eye sockets compared to the different species of allosaurs. So in some cases, they can be quite similar, but it's a completely different sort of a jaw structure. I would say many species of allosaurs, the skulls tend to be taller, whereas if when you look at different species of megalosaurs, whether it's like Torvosaurus, Afrovinator, Megalosaurus itself, the Spinosaurs, they all tend to be much shorter, but a bit longer. So, or at least compared to their body size. So it's quite odd, but very interesting looking at the different traits. And yes, even the teeth in some instances can actually be quite similar looking at different lineages. I think in some cases, megalosaur arms tend to be a bit more heavily built compared to the different species of allosaurs. So, no, this is not a close relative of Allosaurus itself. Okay, I guess we can head back to the article. Oh, yeah, that actually was better with the crest or the horn-like structure having a bit of length and not just a little nub. That's actually what was the issue of the non-animated one was, or non-modeled one was because it looked too Allosaur-like. So it confused me for a second. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, the picture looks just exactly like the skull. Why would a species of pterosaur evolve this type of a jaw structure? It's almost like I mean, it likely was hunting different species of fish, but also I'm wondering if maybe it was going after certain dinosaur hatchlings, because it certainly has the tooth structure to do so. There weren't also many species of armored dinosaurs at this point, even the early theropharians. No, wait a second. They had not evolved. Okay, so yeah, it's very likely it might have hunted smaller theropod dinosaur hatchlings. So Celestiventus hanseni was found in sandstone, so the bones were not crushed. Rather than trying to extricate the thin bones from the sandstone, Dr. Britt and colleagues CT scanned the specimen and created 3D models of the bones for study. Most Triassic specimens consist of just a single bone. For example, a little phalanx from a finger or one vertebra from the neck. Yeah, it's unfortunate when that occurs. It's a huge mystery as to what creature that could belong to, even with comparing it to several different species of what seem to be um, most in resemblance or match in most resemblance. For this animal, we have the sides of the face and the complete roof of the skull, including the brain case, complete lower jaws, and part of the wing. Celestiventus Hanseni's 3D bones provide insights into the evolution of the earliest pterosaurs, especially the skull. These insights include the muscles attached and the nature of the teeth, which numbered about 112. Oh, wait a second. Oh, it's referring to the muscles. Okay. So I was going to say, wow, that's a lot of teeth. You can find many more teeth inside of certain lineages of dinosaurs, like the Hadrosaurus or the Iguanodontids, for instance. But for a pterosaur, that is
How many teeth does an iguanodon? Oh,
several hundred. I don't know how many precisely. I think it might also depend on the. Well, no, I mean, if you're looking at that specific genus, it's probably the same within all individuals, unless they lost a few. So, furthermore, the skull roof preserves the impression of the brain, which reveals that even early pterosaurs had a poor sense of smell and well developed vision. This is actually a very common attribute in many species of pterosaurs, even into the Jurassic, is that they didn't have a really good sense of smell. Like the Agneurignathids, um, so little round, fluffy species. In fact, let's bring one up. Cynognathus. Cynogth. No, wait a second. No, NA, not TH.
Start over.
Cynognathus. Wait. Oh, I brought up a proto mammal. I wait a second. Yeah, yeah, okay. Whoops. I mixed up like a relative of Thrinaxodon from the Triassic and the late Permian and meant to say Agneurognathus, I think. Okay, here we go. A E Nuragum Nathus. This should be a winged reptile or
Oh, I remember
pterosaur in
this
general.
guy.
Yes, the little fluff balls of the Jurassic. So this creature is also from Germany around 152 million years ago. There were Mesognathus. I think that's who I was trying to get a hold of from the United States. But this creature was over in Jurassic Germany and likely coexisted with different species of theropods, sauropods at this time. Okay. This guy has a lot of problems. They did have large heads compared to their body size, but it would still match overall. This is very far off. And also, like the wings, even the way the arms are structured, it doesn't seem to match too large of a core. The feet, or like the legs in general, not sure what to say about them. Now, it's very likely that these animals, or they certainly were covered in feathers, but it's just this creature. Also, trying to think, he has like the skull of something between like a bat, a lizard to an extent, maybe even a toad or a certain tree frog.
Wait, the next one looks like an owl.
Oh, wow, that is okay. I think it's a little too owl-like. I think there were certain species that would have had a somewhat beak. Certain others, like Ignorognathus, that were pretty much just a very circular toothed skull structure.
This looks like a squirrel or something.
Yeah, that's him. Wow. Um, yeah, I would say something between like a squirrel, maybe an owl. Still seems friendly. He seems like he maybe would scream at you too. The others in the distance, I guess they're trying to depict them hunting insects. Yeah, this is a bit of an earlier model. At least the head structure compared to certain earlier representations is a bit closer, but the wings are too short, at least when it comes to the wing membrane itself and not the overall length. Like I'm referring to just the width. The length's likely fine.
You recognize
The
this from
legs
something?
might be a bit thinner. I have not seen that before. It's okay. Yeah, it just looks like somebody took a character from Monsters Incorporated and then mixed it in with a pterosaur. Yeah, it's actually a really good reconstruction. I wonder if that's a toy. I mean, though at first glance, just looks like somebody's model that they made.
No, there are some toys because I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay. Wow. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they look pretty paleo accurate. Like even the wing membranes, they seem to be the right width. Possibly could be slightly wider. Okay, somebody took a bat and then tried turning him into an Ignorognathus. It also looks like something else. You know what it looks like? It looks like somebody um took a bat and then had Stitch as its soul.
So wait, where's it at? Was that the best one?
Um yeah, I mean that is one of the better depictions. Also the wing membrane is very that's the width that you want for these animals. Oh yeah, also with the feet and the legs, these are much better. Those others that we were seeing, at least with certain older, maybe early 2010s depictions, were A bit off, but I guess for the time it was a good guess. Though I don't know, certain ones, the feet seemed immense. Yeah, these guys would just feed on different species of insects. They wouldn't go after dinosaur hatchlings. Probably not even go after at least full-grown, smaller species of reptiles or amphibians. If anything, maybe the hatchlings of those specific animals. But just probably controlling different like species of mosquitoes, which were around at this point, being 150 to 152 million years ago in Jurassic Europe, as well as their relatives over in the United States, like Mesognathus. Oh, okay, let's head back to the article. Oh, yeah, so Mesognathus and Nerdnathus probably had a bad sense of smell. It's a bit of a question as to whether or not they had the ability to have great night vision. I think it is very probable, looking at the immense size of their eye sockets. Callisteventennus hanseni is most closely related to Dimorphodon macronix. Yep, so he does have a very Dimorphodon sort of a look. So it is interesting. It's showing this far back into the Triassic. We already had very advanced Dimorphodon traits already occurring. He won't occur until or evolve somewhere between 160 to 168 million years ago. So known only from lower Jurassic strata of Britain. This indicates that the family Dimorphodontidae originated in the latest Triassic, and the lineage survived the Triassic Jurassic mass extinction event. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, it's creatures like the Bataillonsaurus would go extinct towards the very end of the Triassic. I also, before we head forward into the Cenozoic era and see what's going on with some moose, I would like to commemorate the paleontologist Earl Douglas, and I believe Ernst, which is it, Heitzer. Their discoveries back in August of 1901 on several brontosaurus specimens, I believe, in the state of Utah. So, um, well, I think also when it came to Earl Douglas, he made different discoveries on Stegosaurus, Camptosaurus, possibly Camarasaurus as well, and even different Allosaurus specimens. So back in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s too. Oh, actually, I don't think I think it was a glimpse at this Scelidosaurus earlier. Very long claws compared to many, I'd say any species of herbivore in general. So they might be a little too long and sharp. Most species of herbivores tend to have quite dull toes. It's not necessarily they couldn't cut another herbivore or even theropod with them, but not they weren't theropod like. I would say also certain older representations of the armor. This would be a bit closer. Okay, let's head forward in time. So from Malaysia.news.yahoo, moose returned to Germany thanks to Polish conservation efforts. I guess that's not too surprising, considering we have um, thousands of moose over in Poland compared to Germany, which at least recently are just occasionally wandering into the country. This could be one from, I don't know. He looks a little too North American like. Like, this could be an individual possibly from the northeastern United States or eastern Canada, or maybe even like the Yukon, possibly. Those are very large antlers. At least when it comes to the length, I wouldn't call it too wide. So I don't think that moose has hit its prime yet. More and more moose are being spotted in eastern Germany after crossing the border from Poland and the Czech Republic. The huge animals, which can weigh as much as 700 kilograms. Whoa, hold on a second. Eurasian moose? That's pushing 1,500 pounds. I could see maybe 500 kilograms or slightly larger, which would be pushing around 1,100 pounds. But that's approaching Alaskan moose size. have captured the German public's imagination, with some being given names. Probably the best known was Nushai, who immigrated from Poland in that's funny in 2008 and traveled through several federal states before sadly passing away in 2009. I'm guessing he was just marching through different areas of Germany. More recently, Moose Emil has a website set up in his name to track his progress across Europe. He was first seen in Austria last autumn before being spotted in the Bohemian and Bavarian forests. I think this was this one that literally stopped traffic for several hours in some part of, I think, Western Austria. And he would march or migrate back and forth from like the Western Czech.
Wait, was that the one at the train station?
Yeah. Yeah, he would march from, like, some part of the Western Czech Republic down through, I think, some part of southeastern Germany, like Bavaria, and then back into Western Austria, like Upper Austria, I think. So fans say the last sighting of a mill was at the Frohnau drinking water reservoir in the Bavarian forest in October 2025. Yeah, it was around that time, basically. Interesting. I wonder if that other individual, Nushai, was taken by wolves, considering they have massively increased in population over in Germany. I think there's around pushing 1,100 wolves now in Germany. Um, let's see. So moose are considered to be solitary animals. They can cover long distances of up to 30 kilometers per day. I wouldn't call that necessarily a long distance for a moose, but it depends on the population. You have certain populations of moose that are just, they don't have the need to travel or migrate very far. So they make smaller, um, daily or even sometimes if you're talking about at once yearly migrations of like 12 miles towards like specific areas, but they're consistently on the move daily. And then you have certain other moose populations that can be marching over 120 to 150 miles or pushing somewhere around like 280 kilometers. Moose end up in Germany, thanks largely to conservation efforts in Poland and the Czech Republic. There are thought to be 30,000 moose living in Poland. I knew it was definitely like over 20,000, but specifically 30,000. That's actually quite a number. According to the German Nature and Biodiversity Conservation Union, NABU, moose populations have recovered significantly following protective measures, leading them to move westwards. Moose were widespread throughout Germany until the Middle Ages. They then disappeared completely due to hunting and habitat loss, according to Worldwide Fund for Nature. Those guys can be quite annoying. In Poland, however, the animals are not popular with everyone. As reported by Germany's Deutsche Welle, or DV, many of them are involved in road accidents, leading to moose hunting being allowed again to control numbers and risk. Well, I'm not surprised by that in a country that has 30,000 of them. Likewise, I think you have about 2,000 wolves in Poland. Likewise, in Germany, says NABU, the greatest danger for moose is road traffic due to their size of 1 meter 40. I think it's trying to say 1.4 meters to just over 2 meters, or somewhere between, I think like 5 to 6.6 feet in height. Collisions with cars are serious, according to Die Welt. However, experts do not see this as an acute problem. They're colliding into cars.
Insurance companies aren't saying, please stop the moose.
We saw this before where I think it was occurring. I don't remember if it was elk. Oh, I think it was Estonia or possibly Latvia, where there were several moose collisions, and I think the insurance companies were they not willing to cover for them anymore?
Yeah, they wouldn't cover them.
Yeah, Jeesh. As the population is still very small.
Oh, wait, didn't we just have this problem in California? It was with
There
deer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Something to do with mule deer, but I'm trying to remember if it was California specifically or was another state. I mean, it could have been. I mean, obviously, I mean, it said well, it's mentioned in that last article that 50,000 mule deer are hit annually in California. I don't know how the herds would be able to. You would have to have consistently very good just forage available for the deer. Also, almost no predator, no predation. So being hunted by cougars, people, wolves, coyotes in the area. Yeah, to keep the population from going extinct. So I think there's a major exaggeration. So whether it will stay that way or whether moose will settle permanently remains to be seen. Much depends on how the population in Poland continues to develop. If more animals migrate westwards, the likelihood that they will remain in Germany increases. Well, I think it's also that is the habitat suitable? Is there enough? Those are really the main things. And then how are they when it comes to especially wolf predation? Even though the wolves are quite spread out. Germany is at the western limit of the animal's distribution. So wire moose coming to Germany. According to the WWF, an estimated 10 to 15 animals migrate through northeast Germany every year, but most of them return. Yeah, I think I've heard of this specific region, or really it's where the core population of moose over in Poland are able to reach somewhat suitable areas in Germany. And then there are those regions in like southern Germany that you get moose, the small population moose over in Czech Republic, visit Austria, and then sometimes hang out over in southern part of the country. In principle, moose can cope with different landscapes as long as there is force and water available. In Germany, Brandenburg is particularly popular with moose because of the large, sparsely populated forest and wetland areas that offer the animals suitable conditions. Despite the return of many moose, only 15 to 20 moose are estimated to be living in Germany. Well, they're also competing for like red deer and roe deer for forage too, at least outside of like different marshes that they're obtaining very high amounts of sodium from the different species of aquatic plants to help boost their antler growth. I'm guessing is that it? Yep.
Did you want the Cretaceous Alaska?
Um. Yeah, I guess we can stick that on here. We're gonna head back into the Mesozoic era or the time of the dinosaurs. So from Sci News, Cretaceous Alaska was superhighway for migrating dinosaurs. Paleontologists say, oh, definitely. We do have, I mean, this um, I think evidence for certain footprint tracks of different species of ceratopsians and tyrannosaurs in the area, and also which were probably linking to more southern populations over in different parts of Alberta, Canada. So paleontologists have described the first North American co-occurrence of hadrosaur and therizinosaur tracks. Whoa! In North America, that is shocking. If this is over in Mongolia or China, it's not necessarily that that's too common either, but you have different species of therizinosaurs and hadrosaurs like Therizinosaurus, Barsboldia, um, Orlotitan probably lived a bit earlier in time. I'm trying to think. Oh, like Tyrannosaurus, Saurolophus. No, Saurolophus a bit earlier. Thinking about 70 to 71 million years ago. They coexisted with each other. And so it would be quite expected to find those types of tracks amongst each other, but it's still not necessarily common. But in North America, this is unheard of. And what species of Therizinosaur would be coexisting with hadrosaurs like Edmontosaurus in Alaska? That's just shocking. Providing more evidence that Alaska was a superhighway for dinosaurs between Asia and Western North America 65 to 70 million years ago. I would say 70 million years ago is a bit of a question mark, like even 70 or 70 to 72 million years ago for a wide variety of different lineages of dinosaurs in North America, especially different species of carnivores.
Oh, it's in the back.
Yeah, who is that?
Isn't that supposed to be a Therizinosaur?
Well, no, well, it's what species of Therizinosaur? Therizinosaurus did exist over Mongolia 70 million years ago. Is it possible it might have decided to cross the Bering land bridge? Maybe. But over here, it seems to be like showing, I think, different Montosaurus individuals. I think those are possibly like Dromaeosaurus. In the background, we do have Dromaeosaurus from Alaska.
So is this supposed to be Alaska?
Yes, but I believe it would be a lot flatter and you wouldn't see these mountain ranges. I think there's geese in the background. We did have birds, but we didn't have geese.
Wait,
And
wait. When did geese come about?
I would say at least the Pliocene epoch, so between about 3 to 5 million years ago. So shortly before the Ice Age. So in 2012 to 2014, Dr. Anthony Fiorio from the Perot Museum of Nature and Science and colleagues discovered distinct footprints in Denali National Park, Central Alaska Range. Well, that's interesting. They're over in Denali. Like I was expecting much further north. There are certain areas adjacent to Denali National Park that we also find different specimens of late Cretaceous dinosaurs and even certain trackways. But I was thinking of like the Princeton Formation or the Prince Creek Formation that they determined to be made by therizinosaurs, unusual predatory dinosaurs thought to have become herbivores. Yeah, like their earlier ancestors were likely carnivorous, and they're also much smaller compared to certain species of therizinosaurs, but the therizinosaurs in general seem to be mostly herbivorous. What surprised the team most was the co-occurrence of dozens of hadrosaurs, also known as duckbill dinosaurs. Hadrosaurs are very common and found all over Denali National Park. Previously, they had not been found alongside therizinosaurs in the park. Well, yeah, I mean, alongside therizinosaurs in general in North America, though they would have coexisted with them, at least the earlier hadrosauromorphs, but not specifically members of Hadrosauridae. Um, but I mean, pushing 70 million years ago, which is around the same time as Therizinosaurus, is very possible. And yeah, I mean, this is not an older, it's a later cousin of the Nothronicus from 90 million years ago over in early Lake Cretaceous, New Mexico.
I like the way Ark did it.
I mean, the Isle.
Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not a bad reconstruction of the animal. Yeah, having it with like immense feathers towards the tail, I think that's still a bit of a debate to whether or not that would have occurred. This guy's got problems. Even the arm structure, or like specifically the claws and the head, is very far off. You can say at least he has lips, but a bit too large and broad of a skull. This is better. Still quite odd. I think he's just one of those freakier therizinosaurs, but therizinosaurs, I wouldn't say were the most pleasing to look at when it came to different species of dinosaurs. But I mean, there's still a fascinating lineage of theropods. I think also what's nice about them is that they were just munching on different species of conifers. And you could say that there might have been certain species of like neotheropods from the early Jurassic. If you add in different bird like textures, especially along their throat sac, or different tissue along their skull, and they could be quite freaky as well. That's not a bad representation of a Therizinosaurus. I think the skull in this instance is a lot more matching the overall body in general. In Mongolia, where Therizinosaurs are best known, though no footprints have been found in association, skeletons of hadrosaurs and therizinosaurs have been found to co-occur from a single rock unit. So this was a highly unusual find in Alaska, and it prompted my interest. From our research, um, well, at least at this point, I'm not sure if anything else has occurred more recently. They're mentioning not even Mongolia. There has been coinciding footprints of these two animals. So this is definitely very odd.
So they moved together.
Seems that way. From our research, we've determined that this track association of therizinosaurs and hadrosaurs. Is currently the only one of its kind in North America. And here are the imprints. Of course, yeah, this is what I was wondering. Is it a small therizinosaur species? That is definitely not the massive therizinosaurs from Mongolia, which is to be expected. So who could this be? I'm guessing those hadrosaur tracks are likely of Edmontosaurus, considering the other species of larger hadrosaurs at this time, at least from slightly earlier into the Cretaceous, like from 74 or 75 million years ago, had gone extinct. Hypacrosaurus, Lambeosaurus, Corythosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Longiceps, Parasaurolophus walkeri had all gone extinct. Oh, yeah, very exquisite detail. Hmm. The plant-eating therizinosaurs, which are rare and unusual creatures in the fossil record, had long, skinny necks, little teeth, and a small beak for cropping plants, and big torsos accompanied by large hind feet and long arms. Yeah, they're referring to. Sometimes these guys can be referred to as fat, but it's kind of like when looking at a gorilla, at least a wild gorilla. Sometimes you wonder with certain captive ones, they're actually fat, but they just have an extraordinarily large or wide rib cage, in turn a very large stomach to um, process all of those, or utilize all those different microbes to digest the plant material, which would also have been the case for um, different species of ceratopsians. Probably an elephant would have been a better um, animal to compare it with. And even looking at like rhinos, and this would have been the case with like different species of sauropods as well. So, though therizinosaurs are known from Asia and North America, the best and most diverse fossil record is from Asia. Yeah, that does seem to be the case. Even up to the time of extinction, and therein is the connection. Dr. Fiorio has long postulated that Cretaceous Alaska could have been the thoroughfare for fauna between Western North America and Asia, two continents that shared each other's fauna and flora in the latest stages of the Cretaceous. It's a bit of a debate, though, as to when specifically the different migrations of different species of dinosaurs, like the tyrannosaurs, the different species of ceratopsians, even hadrosaurs, eventually made it to North America. This study helps support the idea that Alaska was the gateway for dinosaurs as they migrated between Asia and North America, said co author Dr. Yashugu Kabayashi of Hokkaido University Museum in Japan. To support the theory, the researchers worked to establish if the tracks were those of a therizinosaur and to study any unique aspects of the ecosystem. Let's also bring up another Alaskan icon, Pachyrhinosaurus. So no, I mean, okay, Pachyrhinosaurus. A giant centrosaur that roamed Alaska, Alberta, probably even to the Yukon. I just don't know. Maybe we've found fragmentary remains of Pachyrhinosaurus in the Yukon. Oh yeah, it's a very feathered representation of this species. This animal did live in the cold, along with different species of Tyrannosaurus, such as Gorgosaurus, the Dromaeosaurus raptor, and um, you see, it's depictions like this that make you wonder if Pachyrhinosaurus really did have feathers, considering it just seems to possibly be one of those instances where, despite not finding any evidence for Pachyrhinosaurus containing feathers along its body, that maybe it was possible. But besides that, it's really not a bad depiction. Um, I'd say that depending on the Pachyrhinosaurus species, this animal could reach over 30 feet in length, or pushing 9 meters, and probably weigh 4 to 5 tons, and had quite short horns along its frill, its overall head structure in general. Let's see, what is this? I think it's from the Walking with Dinosaurs. Oh, this is the 2025 one. Yeah, it's like there's even less, I think, texture or just overall. life in it compared to the 2014 Walking with Dinosaurs movie. But
Okay, these guys just look happy.
oh yeah, I think it's slightly older reconstruction, but yeah, it's a good depiction of a Pachyrhinosaurus, possibly of another species. Considering we have found 3 or 4 different species of Pachyrhinosaurus. So this animal was existing over in Alaska around 75 million years ago, and um, was probably also making different migrations between the spring, summer, fall, and winter months. So likely heading south, maybe venturing to different lowlands, but it was also quite flat throughout much of Alaska at this point. Think what else? Oh, so this is a member of the Centrosaur lineage of ceratopsians, so it's not closely related to later species such as Triceratops and Torosaurus, or even the Styracosaurus at this point. Centrosaurus also pretty much when it came to the dome on the tip of its snout, or at least the um, front upper maxilla of the skull, was pretty much its main source of defense. It's not necessarily that the frill horns towards the top of the skull wouldn't be used for defense, especially if a predator is trying to bite towards the neck, it risks majorly injuring itself with those back horns. And then it has a very distinct somewhat, horn-like structure towards, like, the, center of the skull, like, center between the dome and the frills towards or the horns towards the top of the frill, but this is also a good skull of a good-looking skull of a Pachyrhinosaurus, and you can even see the tiny molars that would have been used for semi-chewing, just not to the efficiency of the different species of hadrosaurs like Edmontosaurus they coexisted with. And also at this point, further south, you would have had different species of hadrosaurs like Lambeosaurus, Corythosaurus, or Parasaurolophus. Trying to see. Oh yeah, Pachyrhinosaurus also seems to have quite large nostrils compared to certain other species of ceratopsians for some reason. So it possibly had a pretty good sense of smell.
Those are some pretty big holes.
Yeah, that's probably though referring to the anorbital fenestra as a whole, and the nostril is technically going to be much smaller. It is interesting in a fluffy Pachyrhinosaur. So they determined that this particular area of Denali was a wet, marsh-like environment, in that one fossil in particular looked like a water lily, which supported the theory that there were ponds and standing water nearby. They suspect that both therizinosaurs and hadrosaurs like these. Wait. Oh, they suspect that both therizinosaurs and hadrosaurs liked these wetter locations. It's very possible, especially with the hadrosaurs, that they were feeding on different species of aquatic plants.
John Doe's in the chat said, "Hope everything is going well."
Um, yeah. Looking at some hadrosaurs and Triassic reptiles, well, as well as Triassic crocodile monitor lizard like reptiles, different species of large, like over 40-ton Triassic marine ichthyosaur reptiles. What's going on with moose over in northeastern Germany? And I believe a new species of closely related dimorphodontid pterosaur from the Triassic. So this Alaskan discovery may connect these animals environmentally and perhaps behaviorally to other therizinosaurs in Central Asia. I would assume so. Even the North American species had a lot in common with the Asian species of therizinosaurs. Okay, so we're going to give everybody a minute to stick in any comments about whatever when it comes to prehistoric to current animals, or just goofy comments in general
In the chat.
in the chat. Stick around. So you asked what is the most unique dinosaur?
John Doe, yep. What is the most unique dinosaur in your opinion?
I mean, I really think it's I mean, you could say that that's a bit of a hard question because there are so many there's different lineages of dinosaurs with their own sort of forms. Like when you're looking at different species of the horned ceratopsians, for instance, like Pachyrhinosaurus, Syrachosaurus, Triceratops, and they have their own distinct types of horn structures. Their frills are different. Their snouts or their beaks are shaped differently, even when looking at their teeth. And then you can look at different species of ankylosaurs or nodosaurs, and it's a very different look. But looking at specifically a certain type of species, I mean, I think even T Rex is very unique in his own way. You could say, well, he shares a wide range of different characteristics with earlier representatives of his lineage. But looking at the dinosaurs as a whole, not including today's modern birds, which we have discovered or described over 10,000 species, looking at I'd say somewhere between 1,000 to 1,100 species of dinosaurs have been described recently. And some might also claim that there have been more that have been discovered. However, you have so many instances where one might be classified as invalid or another pops up as valid, and it's just back and forth. So putting it around that number, it's just that T Rex has some of the smallest arms compared to his body size of any dinosaur, but they're quite strong. It's also been theorized that the arms might have been used for possibly like family communication. But then when looking at like his skull structure, it's very different from even other species of tyrannosaurs. Like even when looking at Tarbosaurus or Daspletosaurus, it has its own not just much larger size, but very even much more robustness added to it. And the teeth are also much more blunt and wider compared to Tarbosaurus, Daspletosaurus. And then definitely when you're comparing to like Allosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, we I think also when looking at the overall like hip or leg structure of T-Rex, it's very different from different species of even larger carcharodontosaurs and definitely of spinosaurs. Now you could also say that Spinosaurus aegypticus specifically is very distinct in its own look compared to even other spinosaurs themselves. Then you have Sigillomosaurus, Siamosaurus, which can be quite similar in look.
Wait, how many types of Spinosauruses are there?
And there have been around 12 to 13 different species have been discovered. Though it might have been added to like 14 from that recent Spinosaur species. We have found a number of baryonychids in recent years, which would include Spinosaurs such as Baryonyx and Suchomimus. Um, hmm.
I just find T Rex's smelling ability.
Well, that is another one. He seems to have the most powerful sense of smell of any species of dinosaur. There were probably certain species of larger carnivores that were similar, like when looking at the olfactory nerve of the brain, which is used for sense of smell. That is T Rex's largest region, or that's his largest part of the brain. So for some reason, evolution decided in the Tyrannosaur lineage to put a lot of emphasis into smell. It's not necessarily that other theropods or like members of Megalosauroideae or Allosauridae didn't put emphasis into smell, but just not to the same extent, like with what we see in other species of Tyrannosaurs. Also, when it comes to intelligence, also, I think it's the different growth stages that we see with T Rex, but you could also say this with like Spinosaurus. Your youngsters likely had like barely had a sail or an elongated back vertebrae, and it would become larger as they progressed in age. And the same thing for like probably the type of snout that they had, but it was probably closer with Spinosaurus and its skull structure with the baby form and the adult, as opposed to T Rex with the baby and its adult version, because looking at the T Rex juveniles and possibly hatchling recently, it seems to be that they had a very light build compared to like the later juvenile stages and into the adults. Whereas other previous species of tyrannosaurs seem to be much more lightly built or much have a much lighter build in general. But then, for instance, the therizinosaurs are very unique in their own way. That is a hard question, but I'll put T Rex up there.
Okay, John Doe said, how can they tell if it's a different species and not a different sex?
There have been a handful of specimens, like T Rex is one of them, where we had preserved tissue indicating that the animal was pregnant when it died with a certain species or individual T Rex. I think it was Sue itself or herself. But I don't remember at the moment what other dinosaur species we have found with tissue indicating that it was male or female, usually female. But besides those few individuals, it's really impossible to know whether or not one specimen was a male or a female. Now, regarding whether one is another species or not, there can be certain specimens where it's much for debate, but they also tend to be very fragmentary specimens, or it's simply like one of the only ones of its kind, but we also don't have any other dinosaurs that really match that specific species or um, type of dinosaur that could belong to a completely new lineage that we're unfamiliar with. But usually, let's say we have found like certain species of carnivorous theropod dinosaur, even a ceratopsian, we tend to compare it with other species that have very similar looking bone structures, and then why they name it a distinct genus, possibly even link it to a different subfamily. But if it's close enough, we can put it with the same genus, kind of like with Pachyrhinosaurus, and then just give it a different species name because there are certain slight enough distinctions that keep it within the genus Pachyrhinosaurus, but give it its own species. And you could say for giving it a different genus, like naming it Pentaceratops instead of Pachyrhinosaurus, it's usually like a completely different type of a frill structure when it happens to um when the need for a different genus name occurs. Now a different subfamily, um that's definitely much more challenging, like whether you're sticking it into the Chasmosauridae or Centrosaur lineage, but that's a bit broader of a family. In the like ceratopsian lineage in general, there can be like an even more direct subfamily from those. That's, I think, I don't exactly know how specifically that occurs. I mean, obviously, there's the Centrosaur and Chasmosaur distinction. I'm just trying to think of in between, but usually it's that um, looking at the overall, especially frill structure. I think even when it comes to the teeth, I have to double check on that. Because you can have certain Chasmosaurs and Centrosaurs that look very similar, but, something keeps them from being in one or the other group.
Have we found dinosaurs that were pregnant or just the reptiles, the sea reptiles?
Yeah, definitely many species of marine reptiles we have found with preserved, like the ichthyosaurs pups in or, not necessarily hatchling, I was trying to think of the other word. Well, inside the rib cage. But when it comes to dinosaurs, possibly we have found skeletons where the eggs are still intact. I think so. Possibly certain oviraptorids or maybe even ceratopsians, but I would have to check. I don't know at the moment. If there's anything else that you'd like to know about animals in general, please stick it in the chat. At least what's hitting me with like the differences in chasmosaurs and centrosaurs is that centrosaurs tend to have a bit more of like a shorter type of a frill, tends to be a bit um I guess enclosed and even a bit curved forward towards the front of the snout. Like when you look at species like Ionosaurus, Inoceratops, Nasuceratops possibly is also a centrosaur. It's that one that almost has like a longhorn cattle type horns, but they're not exactly off to the side of its skull. They're right um, just above the eye sockets. Like with Triceratops, they're just curved inwards. Um, they also tend to have a bit more of like a dome or a flatter sort of a nasal horn, but sometimes they can have a very long protruding horn like Centrosaurus itself. But then there's creatures like Styracosaurus, which some could confuse for a centrosaur, even though it's a chasmosaur, because it has that elongated single horn. And yeah, I think that might be the main thing. Though it has a very distinct variety of long horns around its main frill, but the frill is extended backwards towards the neck, which is in a lot of cases more of a chasmosaur trait. They tend to really have a better instance of shielding the neck. Centrosaurs are like facing towards the front.
Uh, I'm not totally sure what John Doe's saying, but he says the American Museum of Natural History in New York City has the first dinosaur mummy, and it took me years to actually see why. But I'm not sure see why.
It's not hitting me at the moment what the first dinosaur mummy was that we have discovered, because some can just refer to certain skin fragments as mummy, but you're probably referring to a full intact specimen. I just don't know what that is. And we have found different like hadrosaur mummies, nodosaur mummies, like with who's that? Um, Orionica pelta. We also found preserved tissue as well. I'm trying to think of who else, like different microraptors too, somewhat.
Uh, the famous dinosaur mummy at the American Museum of Natural History in New York is an exceptional, well-preserved fossil of a duck-billed dinosaur, Montosaurus annectus. Wait,
Yeah, nectins.
discovered in Wyoming in 1908.
Huh. Wow. Okay. I'm not familiar with that specific specimen. Montosaurus annectens is the species of Montosaurus that, or Hadrosaur, that T Rex would have extensively fed on. In fact, we have a preservation of a Montosaurus specimen. I think it's over in the Denver Museum of Natural Science or History, where the bite marks from a T Rex had healed. So the Montosaurus got away. Interesting. Wow. Wonder who found that. 1908. I mean, Earl Douglas was digging for different species of dinosaurs. We had a wide range of paleontologists. Um, well, I mean, um, still kind of following the bone wars of like Othniel Charles Marsh, and Edward Drinker Cope, I guess, type of atmosphere to an extent back then. I think it's also like around the time when Diplodocus almost pops up in
Okay.
Colorado.
Charles Hazelus Sternberg
Oh yeah, him.
and his 3 sons, George, Charles Jr., and Levi.
Yeah, all of them were fossil collectors as well. I know he specifically described different species of dinosaurs and also had consistent communications with the um, Swedish paleontologist Carl Wine. Like he sent him specimens from the United States, and I think he described almost all of them. Like I think he described Parasaurolophus Weinberg. I think he named after him. Okay. So, thanks for joining. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guy Live Daily News. Happy International Pachyrhinosaurus Day. And remember that nothing is better than all animals all the time.